You don't kiss another man's wife when he's in jail, and especially if you're a cop, because that's how you get incidents like these. You see, jailbirds hate cops, but they hate corrupt officers even more, because the corrupt cops tend to be a little more trigger-happy and a little more power-drunk. So whether it's cause of drugs or sex, violence, or just plain old hate, this is a list of corrupt cops who bent the law and got bent out of shape by inmates. The female officer of St. Louis Jail Center. Her face has been blurred out for her own safety, and her identity has been withheld because the crackhead inmate that did this to her in jail could get his people to do it to her again, outside jail. The victim here is a female correctional officer in the St. Louis Jail Center. Now, it's difficult to say what the inmate had against her that made him attack her with so much venom. Was he trying to force himself on her, or was he just a hateful piece of shit? None of the reasons I mentioned are reason enough to touch any woman or anyone for that matter, but St. Louis has had a really terrible history with its inmates. Thankfully, the spokesperson for the Director of Public Safety said the officer ended up with some minor injuries to her face. Nothing too serious, thankfully. The incident sent the Division of Corrections into overdrive, launching a full-fledged investigation into what exactly went down. And trust me, folks, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the problems plaguing this facility. This isn't the first rodeo for the City Justice Center. Oh no, far from it. In fact, it's become something of a hotspot for troublemakers. Just last year, inmates pulled off a daring stunt, attacking a guard and freeing dozens of their fellow inmates. Talk about pure chaos. And if that wasn't enough, there have been multiple reports of guards getting caught in the crossfire, sustaining injuries left and right. It's like something straight out of a movie, except this is real life, folks. But wait, it gets even juicier. There's also been allegations of vendors not getting their due, potentially leading to food shortages. I mean, come on, food shortages in a jail? That's a recipe for disaster. Anthony John Sully
was on death row after being convicted of killing several people in the 1980s, died of natural causes. Now, the California Department of Corrections says 79-year-old Anthony Sully died at the San Quentin Rehabilitation Center last Friday morning.
Born in San Francisco on January 2, 1944, Sully had a troubled childhood and later pursued a career in law enforcement. However, his marriages ended in divorce due to allegations of physical abuse. Sully's journey into law enforcement began after his marriage to Elizabeth Ann in 1965. Motivated by a desire to protect and serve, he applied for a job at the Millbrae Police Department in California. In 1966, Sully's dream became a reality as he officially became a police officer. Over the next 8 years, from 1966 to 1974, he served in the Patrol and Post Service, patrolling the streets of Millbrae and ensuring the safety of its residents. During this time, Sully maintained a completely clean record and was highly regarded by his co-workers. While Sully's colleagues saw him as a dedicated and trustworthy officer, his behavior began to change in 1969. It was during this time that his wife Elizabeth filed for divorce, alleging that she had been physically abused by Sully for 4 years. The once loving husband had transformed into a violent and abusive partner. In 1974, Sully's marriage to Elizabeth ended, and he quickly moved on to his second wife, Donna. However, this marriage was also plagued by Sully's violent tendencies. After just 15 months, Donna had enough and filed for divorce, citing constant physical assaults. With his career as a police officer behind him and a trail of broken relationships, Sully decided to embark on a new path. In the late 1970s, he started his own business as an electrical and construction contractor. Renting a hangar in Burlingame, California, Sully used it as a warehouse for his business operations. Little did anyone suspect that within the walls of this seemingly ordinary warehouse, Sully's sinister desires would take hold. It was during this time that he became involved in drugs and developed an increased sexual appetite towards women. And it all began when Sully crossed paths with Tina Livingston, the owner of a local escort agency. One of Livingston's employees, Gloria Fravel, found herself in a desperate situation. Unable to repay a $500 debt, Fravel attempted to escape the clutches of her profession. However, Livingston and another sex worker named Kelly Angel Burns tracked her down and brought her to Sully's warehouse in Burlingame. He offered Fravel the opportunity to engage in sexual acts, but she adamantly refused. Enraged by her defiance, Sully subjected her to unimaginable torture and sexual assault. Meanwhile, Livingston and Burns were kept separate from the gruesome scene, unaware of the horrors unfolding just a few feet away. Fravel endured unspeakable torment at the hands of Sully. He bound her, handcuffed her, and even hung her from the ceiling using a hangman's knot. Fravel was repeatedly drugged with cocaine, rendering her helpless and disoriented. In a moment of desperation, Fravel managed to free herself from her restraints and began screaming for help. Livingston and Burns rushed to silence her, but their attempts were in vain. Sully, driven by a twisted rage, entered the room and strangled Fravel with a rope, ending her life. life. Sully disposed of Fravel's body. He placed her lifeless form in a car and embarked on a journey to dispose of the evidence. However, fate intervened when Fravel regained consciousness during the trip. In a chilling act of brutality, Sully struck her repeatedly with an axe, ensuring her silence forever. The lifeless body of Gloria Fravel was left near State Route 35, where it would be discovered on February 7th. Sully, displaying a disturbing lack of remorse, kept a newspaper article reporting the discovery of her body as a twisted trophy. To him, the fact that she had been found by a butcher was nothing short of hilarious. Sully's thirst for violence and control continued to escalate. He sought out his next victim, Brenda Oakton, a 19-year-old who had run away from her home in Huntington Beach. Oakton, known for her love of punk rock and occasional involvement in prostitution under the name Brenda Rule, became the next target of Sully's depravity. Oakton was lured to Sully's warehouse under the guise of a meeting. Once inside, Sully coldly shot her in the back of the head with a .38 caliber revolver. Determined to cover his tracks, Sully enlisted Livingston's help in spreading a false rumor among Oakton's friends and acquaintances. They claimed that Oakton had boarded a bus and left San Francisco, leaving her fate unknown. His next victims were Michael Thomas, a 24-year-old pimp, and his 20-year-old common-law wife, Phyllis Melendez. Thomas had a criminal record for robbery and drug possession, while Melendez had been arrested for prostitution multiple times in 1982. In April 1983, Sully invited Thomas and Melendez to his hangar, where he had a fateful encounter with them. Shortly after their arrival, Sully shot both victims in the back of the head, ending their lives in a cold and calculated manner. To conceal his crimes, Sully resorted to a macabre method of disposal. He placed the bodies of Oakton, Thomas, and Melendez in 55-gallon drums, filling them with concrete. Under the cover of darkness, Sully and his accomplices dropped the drums in Golden Gate Park on April 29th, hoping to erase any trace of their horrific deeds. His next victim was Barbara Searcy, an ex-girlfriend who had unknowingly fallen into his deadly trap. Sully lured Searcy to his hangar in August 1983, promising her financial assistance. Once inside, he callously shot her in the back of the head, ending her life and adding another name to his growing list of victims. Sully's final victim was Catherine Barrett, a 24-year-old drug dealer. In late August 1983, Sully invited Barrett to his hangar under the pretense of purchasing cocaine. However, his true intentions were far more sinister. With the help of his accomplice, Michael Anthony Francis, Sully attacked Barrett, stabbing her 6 times in the chest and striking her repeatedly with a sledgehammer. Barrett's lifeless body was found naked, wrapped in plastic bags, in South San Francisco's industrial district on August 19th. The gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the community, heightening the urgency to bring Sully to justice. On August 25th, 1983, investigators finally apprehended Sully. His fingerprints were positively matched to those found on the barrels containing the bodies of Thomas, Oakton, and Melendez. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including handprints, stolen barrels, and personal belongings of the victims found in his car and warehouse. In October 1983, Sully was charged with the 6 murders. Despite pleading not guilty on all counts, a jury found him guilty in June 1986. Just 12 days later, Sully was sentenced to death for his heinous crimes. The shocking murders committed by Anthony John Sully had forever scarred the community of Burlingame, California. Prior to his death, Sully suffered from an unspecified form of cancer and had been in declining health. Sully died of natural causes at a medical facility on the morning of September 8, 2023, at the age of 79. Theodore Dyer.
He was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
In the quiet town of Muskegon, Michigan, a sinister tale of betrayal and horror unfolded, leaving the community in shock and disbelief. This is the chilling story of Theodore Dyer, a former airport police officer whose evil deeds forever scarred the lives of those he was meant to protect. Theodore Dyer, entrusted with the responsibility of upholding the law, committed a heinous act of violence against a young teenager, shattering the innocence of the community. As news of the assault spread, the town demanded justice, and Dyer was swiftly apprehended. But the story took a dark turn when Dyer found himself sharing a prison cell with Stephen Sanderson, a man with his own twisted past. Their twisted bond led to a shocking turn of events as Sanderson took matters into his own hands, ending Dyer's life. Join us as we delve into the depths of Theodore Dyer's evil deeds, exploring the complexities of human nature and the devastating impact of his actions. Brace yourself for a tale that will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning the very nature of justice. It was a cold winter's night in Muskegon, Michigan, when Dyer committed a heinous crime that would forever haunt the victim and the community. The victim, a 15-year-old girl whose identity remains protected, was walking home from school, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. Theodore Dyer, a former airport police officer, had been stalking her for weeks, his sinister intentions hidden beneath a facade of authority. With calculated precision, Dyer approached the unsuspecting girl, his eyes gleaming with a twisted desire for power and control. He struck her from behind, rendering her defenseless and vulnerable. The young girl fought desperately, but Dyer's strength and training as a police officer proved overpowering. In a secluded alleyway, away from prying eyes, Dyer subjected the girl to unspeakable horrors. He violated her body and soul, leaving her broken and traumatized. The echoes of her screams reverberated through the night, unheard by those who could have intervened. After satisfying his sadistic desires, Dyer callously left the girl lying in the alley, her innocence forever stolen. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a shattered life and a community gripped by fear. The aftermath of Dyer's evil act was devastating. The victim, her spirit crushed, struggled to find solace and healing. The once vibrant and carefree teenager became a shell of her former self, haunted by nightmares and plagued by a deep sense of shame. News of the assault spread like wildfire through the town, sending shockwaves of anger and disbelief. How could someone sworn to protect and serve commit such a heinous act? The community demanded justice. Their trust in law enforcement shattered. Law enforcement agencies launched a relentless investigation, determined to bring Dyer to justice. The evidence against him was overwhelming, from eyewitness testimonies to DNA found at the crime scene. The weight of his guilt was undeniable. In the courtroom, the victim bravely took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute. She recounted the harrowing details of the assault, reliving the trauma in front of a sea of faces. Her testimony painted a vivid picture of Dyer's monstrous actions, leaving no room for doubt. Dyer, in a desperate attempt to maintain his facade of innocence, employed a range of tactics. He tried to discredit the victim, painting her as an unreliable witness. He questioned the validity of the evidence, claiming it was a conspiracy against him. But his attempts to manipulate the truth fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence and the unwavering strength of the victim's testimony. The jury, appalled by the evil deeds committed by a man entrusted with protecting the public, delivered a swift and unanimous guilty verdict. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and anger, the community finally finding a semblance of closure. Theodore Dyer's conviction marked a turning point in the community's healing process. It was a reminder that justice could prevail, even in the face of unimaginable evil. The victim, though forever scarred, found solace in knowing that her bravery had brought her assailant to account. Dyer, known for his manipulative nature, continued to discuss his crime with fellow inmates, showing no remorse for his actions. It was during these discussions that he caught the attention of his cellmate, Stephen Sanderson. Sanderson, a complex and enigmatic individual, had a troubled past of his own. He had experienced firsthand the devastating impact of crimes against children and was determined to prevent further harm. As he listened to Dyer's callous discussions, a plan began to form in Sanderson's mind. He saw himself as a guardian, a protector of innocent lives, and so on a fateful day within the prison walls, Sanderson executed his plan. With a string in hand, he approached Dyer, who was unsuspecting of the danger that lurked. In a swift and calculated act, Sanderson strangled Dyer, ending his life and ensuring that he would never harm another child again. The shocking nature of Dyer's death sent shockwaves through the prison system and beyond. Some hailed Sanderson as a hero, applauding his actions as a necessary measure to protect society. Others, however, questioned the morality of taking justice into one's own hands, even in the face of such heinous crimes. The courtroom was once again the stage for a gripping legal battle as Sanderson faced trial for Dyer's murder. His remorseless demeanor during the proceedings shocked onlookers, leaving them questioning the depths of his own humanity. Despite the shocking nature of his actions, Sanderson did not view himself as a hero. He saw his act as a necessary step to facilitate Dyer's meeting with fate. The judge, in a moment of contemplation, delivered a sentence that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Sanderson was sentenced to life in jail with the chance of release, but due to Michigan law, he would have to serve his current life term before starting his new sentence for Dyer's murder. This twist in the sentencing added another layer of shock to an already sensational case. Sanderson's attorney, acknowledging his client's traumatic background, depicted him as a charming yet perplexing individual. The courtroom was left divided, with some sympathizing with Sanderson's motives, while others condemned his actions. Regardless of one's stance, the shocking events surrounding Theodore Dyer's death have left an indelible mark on the community and the criminal justice system. Gerard Schaefer.
Here's what happened. They accused me of killing 34 people in the newspaper. All right? Imagine yourself waking up some morning and seeing your picture on the front page with being accused of 34 murders. It is absolutely devastating.
Known as the Killer Cop, Schaefer was a notorious American serial killer who terrorized Florida during the late 1960s and early 1970s. His sadistic and violent crimes sent shockwaves through the nation, earning him a place among the most depraved individuals to ever walk the earth. Gerard Schaefer's troubled childhood and the development of his violent and sadistic tendencies provide crucial insight into the mind of a serial killer. Born on March 25, 1946 in Wisconsin, Schaefer grew up in a household plagued by dysfunction and turmoil. His relationship with his father was particularly strained, and the constant conflict between them left a lasting impact on Schaefer's psyche. From an early age, Schaefer exhibited signs of deviant behavior. He developed a fascination with inflicting pain on himself, engaging in acts of self-harm that hinted at the sadistic tendencies that would later define his criminal acts. This self-destructive behavior was likely a manifestation of the deep-seated emotional and psychological trauma he experienced during his formative years. As Schaefer entered adolescence, his behavior took a more disturbing turn. He began to engage in peeping Tom behavior, secretly observing unsuspecting individuals, particularly women, without their knowledge or consent. This voyeuristic behavior provided Schaefer with a sense of power and control, fueling his growing fascination with domination and violence. In addition to his voyeuristic tendencies, Schaefer also developed a penchant for cross-dressing. This behavior, often associated with sexual deviance, further exemplified the complex and disturbed nature of his psychological makeup. It is believed that his cross-dressing served as a means of escape, allowing him to explore and express his darkest desires in a way that felt both thrilling and taboo. The combination of Schaefer's troubled childhood, strained relationship with his father, self-inflicted pain, voyeuristic tendencies, and cross-dressing all contributed to the development of his violent and sadistic tendencies. These early signs of deviance and the gradual escalation of his behavior foreshadowed the horrors that would unfold in the years to come. Schaefer's violent and sadistic tendencies reached their peak when he abducted two teenage girls, Nancy Ellen Trotter and Paula Sue Wells, in 1972. His intention was to rape and murder them, but miraculously, they managed to escape. This failed attempt at fulfilling his darkest desires only served to further fuel his insatiable appetite for violence. The arrest and subsequent conviction of Schaefer for false imprisonment and aggravated assault related to the abduction of Trotter and Wells shed light on the depths of his depravity. However, it was during his imprisonment that the true extent of his sadistic nature was revealed. The bodies of two other teenage girls, Susan Carol Place and Georgia Marie Jessup, were discovered, bearing the marks of torture and decapitation. These gruesome discoveries solidified Schaefer's status as a serial killer, and the investigation into his crimes expanded to include the suspected murders of Mary Alice Briscolina, Elsie Lena Farmer, Colette Marie Goodenough, and Barbara Ann Wilcox. Inside Schaefer's home, they found disturbing writings that detailed his sadistic fantasies. These writings provided a chilling insight into the mind of a man who took pleasure in the suffering of others. They also discovered a collection of weapons and pornographic materials, further cementing Schaefer's depravity. But perhaps the most chilling discovery was the personal belongings and remains of other missing individuals. It became clear that Schaefer's reign of terror extended far beyond the known victims. The true extent of his crimes may never be fully known, but it is believed that he was responsible for the deaths of many more innocent lives. Schaefer's trial began in September 1973, and the prosecution presented a wealth of physical and circumstantial evidence linking him to the murders. Witnesses testified to seeing Schaefer with the victims and identifying personal belongings found in his possession. The defense, however, attempted to cast doubt on the timeline of the crimes and discredit the witnesses' testimony. It was a battle between good and evil, with the lives of countless victims hanging in the balance. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. Gerard John Schaefer Jr. was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and sorrow, relief that justice had been served, but sorrow for the lives that had been lost at the hands of this sadistic killer. Schaefer maintained his innocence throughout his imprisonment, claiming that he was framed by prosecutors and corrupt law enforcement. But his claims fell on deaf ears. He had developed a reputation as an aloof and manipulative inmate, spending his time writing and corresponding with others. His attempts to manipulate the system and escape the consequences of his actions were in vain. Despite his appeals, Schaefer remained behind bars, with the possibility of parole after serving a certain number of years. But fate had other plans for this twisted soul. In 1995, 1945, Schaefer's life came to a violent end when he was stabbed to death by a fellow inmate. It was a fitting end for a man who had caused so much pain and suffering. He had been stabbed over 40 times about the face, head, neck, and body, with his throat also being slashed, his right eye destroyed, and several ribs fractured. His body was discovered after a fellow inmate informed staff of his death. According to prison officials and prosecutors, a 32-year-old fellow inmate named Vincent Faustino Rivera had killed Schaefer following an argument over who received the final cup of hot water from a dispenser days prior to his murder. Rivera was convicted of Schaefer's murder in 1999. He received 53 years and 10 months imprisonment added to the sentence of life, plus 20 years he was already serving for a double homicide committed in Tampa in 1990. Cabo Bruno. Cabo Bruno Floresvaldo de Oliveira was born on November 18, 1958, in the small town of Uchoa, Brazil. Growing up, he faced numerous challenges that would shape his future in unimaginable ways. It was during his childhood in Catanduva that Cabo Bruno's nickname was born. His friends, in a provocative manner, compared him to a local alcoholic named Bruno. Surprisingly, even his own mother began calling him Cabo Bruno, and the name stuck. Little did anyone know at the time that this seemingly innocent nickname would become synonymous with fear and violence in the years to come. As Cabo Bruno grew older, his troubled upbringing began to manifest itself in his behavior. He developed a deep-seated hatred for the fringes of society, and it was this hatred that would ultimately drive him to commit heinous acts of violence. While some of his killings were motivated by this hatred, others seemed to be driven by his victims' appearances. Testimonials from those who encountered Cabo Bruno suggested that he had a particular disdain for those who did not fit into his narrow view of what was acceptable. As a military police officer, Bruno's primary responsibility was to maintain law and order within his community. He was entrusted with the task of protecting the innocent and upholding justice. However, it was during his time in this position that Bruno's true nature began to reveal itself. Bruno's descent into corruption and abuse of power started gradually. At first, it was small acts of misconduct, such as accepting bribes from criminals to turn a blind eye to their illegal activities. These acts may have seemed insignificant at the time, but they were just the beginning of a much darker path that Bruno would soon embark upon. As Bruno's thirst for power grew, so did his involvement in criminal activities. He started using his position as a military police officer to intimidate and extort money from those he deemed as threats or easy targets. He would often target individuals involved in illegal activities, taking advantage of their vulnerability and fear of law enforcement. It is important to note that Cabo Bruno's crimes were not limited to a specific time or place. He operated almost exclusively in his spare time, targeting individuals in the district of Jabaquara. During his reign of terror, residents of Jabaquara lived in constant fear, as Cabo Bruno's presence brought a sense of insecurity to the area. Traders in the district were rumored to be his biggest customers, seeking his vigilante justice to protect their businesses. However, Cabo Bruno vehemently denied these claims, adding another layer of mystery to his already enigmatic persona. One survivor of Cabo Bruno's murderous rampage was José Aparecido Benedito. After being shot by Cabo Bruno, José managed to escape by pretending to be dead. His harrowing experience shed light on the true extent of Cabo Bruno's brutality and the lengths he would go to in order to carry out his twisted sense of justice. Cabo Bruno's notoriety reached new heights when journalist Caco Barcelos covered his last imprisonment for the Jornal Nacional. The media attention surrounding Cabo Bruno's case brought the full extent of his crimes to the public's attention. Most of the shootings he was charged with occurred in 1982, and the discovery of numerous bodies riddled with bullets in the region during that year sent shockwaves through the community. Adding to his mystique, Cabo Bruno's choice of vehicles became a part of his infamous reputation. He would frequently change the colors of his cars, which included a Chevrolet Chevette, Ford Maverick, and a Chevrolet Impala. This constant alteration of his vehicles only added to the difficulty of tracking him down and capturing him. But Bruno's corruption didn't stop there. He began to see himself as a self-proclaimed dispenser of justice, taking matters into his own hands. He believed that he had the right to decide who deserved to live and who deserved to die. This twisted sense of morality led him down a path of cold-blooded murder. Bruno's victims ranged from rival criminals to innocent civilians who had unknowingly crossed his path. He would meticulously plan each murder, leaving no trace behind. His victims were found in various locations, their bodies often mutilated and left as a gruesome warning to others. The sheer number of deaths attributed to Bruno is staggering. It is estimated that he was responsible for over 50 deaths during his reign of terror. The community lived in fear, not knowing who would be his next target. Bruno's actions sent shockwaves through the city, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. But how did Bruno manage to evade capture for so long? How did he continue to carry out his evil deeds without being caught? These questions haunted the minds of investigators and the community alike. The relentless pursuit of justice eventually caught up with Cabo Bruno. A team of dedicated investigators worked tirelessly to gather evidence against him, painstakingly piecing together the puzzle of his crimes. The breakthrough came when a survivor of one of Bruno's attacks bravely came forward, providing crucial information that would lead to his downfall. In a dramatic turn of events, Bruno was finally apprehended, bringing a sense of relief to the community that had lived in fear for far too long. The evidence against him was overwhelming, leaving no doubt of his guilt. The courtroom was filled with tension as the families of the victims looked on, seeking closure and justice. Bruno's trial was a harrowing experience as the details of his evil deeds were laid bare for all to hear. The courtroom was filled with gasps and tears as the survivors and families of the victims recounted their horrifying experiences. The weight of Bruno's crimes hung heavy in the air as the community grappled with the aftermath of his reign of terror. Despite his attempts to maintain his innocence, Bruno was convicted on multiple counts of murder. The judge, recognizing the severity of his crimes, sentenced him to 113 years in prison. It was a small measure of justice for the lives he had taken and the pain he had inflicted upon so many. But even behind bars, Bruno's reign of terror was not yet over. He managed to escape from prison multiple times, causing panic and fear among the authorities. Each escape attempt only served to further cement his status as a dangerous and unpredictable criminal. However, fate finally caught up with Cabo Bruno. During one of his escape attempts, he was fatally shot by two individuals while on a walk with his relatives who were left unharmed. The news of his demise brought a sense of closure to the community, a glimmer of hope that they could finally begin to heal from the wounds he had inflicted. The stories of cops getting attacked in jail are a stark reminder of the dangers within the prison system. Stay tuned for more gripping content on our channel. Watch, subscribe, and explore.